The cage rattled like a bad promise. Dust blew across the crossroads, thin as flour over a bare table. Wagons creaked. Men leaned on posts and watched. In the center stood the iron cage on a freight wagon, bolts bright as teeth. Inside, a broad-shouldered man sat with his hands resting quietly on his knees. Scars shadowed his throat. He did not speak. He only watched the wind move through the cottonwoods. Clara Wynne held a train ticket and a small carpet bag. The ticket felt heavy, like it carried her whole past. She had saved for it by sewing buttonholes until her fingers burned. It was meant to carry her away to a new start. A husband in Cheyenne who had stopped answering letters. She saw the man in the cage and felt the world pause. Not fear, not yet. Something like a bell note far off. "Name's Rafe Alder," someone near her said. Mindfire took his words. Took other things too. The deputy Mott strutted and spat. "He's bound for trial," he told anyone who would listen. "Bad business in Silverton. Best he never sees the street again." Clara stepped closer. Rafe lifted his eyes. They were steady like river stones. He did not lower them when the deputy barked. "What are you doing, miss?" asked the town midwife, Mrs. Harper, kindly but wary. "Looking," Clara said. And thinking. The judge's office door stood open. Judge Elam sat behind a desk stacked with papers, his face lined from years of keeping tempers from breaking. He looked up when Clara came in. "Sir," she said. Her voice shook once and then steadied. "If a person stands between harm and a stranger, does the law help her do it clean?" The judge set his pen down. "Sometimes," he said, "if she knows the cost." Clara told him about the letters that went quiet, the ticket, the way the man in the cage had looked at the wind and not at the crowd. "There is mercy in him," she said. "I can feel it. What are you asking?" "A custody marriage," she said. "Civil. I will take him north and keep him to good work. Let the court call him husband and let the key turn." Outside, the wind rose like a held breath. Judge Elam studied her, then nodded once. "Bring the deputy," he said. "We will hear this today." Deputy Mott arrived frowning, hands on his belt like he could squeeze the law harder. Mrs. Harper came too, wiping flour from her hands. Rafe was led in under guard, chains light but loud. He did not drag his feet. He stood straight and quiet, eyes on the window where dust swirled. Judge Elam read the petition. "Civil union for custody and employment," he said. "Miss Wynne, do you understand the duty? Food, roof, honest oversight." "No harm, I do," Clara said. "And I will set him to good work and keep him proper." The deputy snorted. "He's in danger in boots. Send him on to Silverton and be done." Rafe's gaze moved to Clara. She felt the weight of it, not heavy, only steady. "Sir," she said to the judge, "let the man earn daylight." Judge Elam nodded once. "I will allow it, Mrs. Harper. Will you witness?" "I will," said the midwife. "I see what I see." The judge spoke the short vows. "No flowers, no music, just words laid straight as fence posts," Clara answered clearly. Rafe touched 2 fingers to his breast and then to the table as if to say yes. The judge accepted it. A key turned. The deputy unlocked the chain with a huff. Outside, the afternoon had a thin gold edge. Clara handed the deputy a paper. He handed her nothing in return but a warning look. They walked out of town on the wagon road, Clara with her bag, Rafe with a coil of rope over one shoulder. He did not try to hold her arm. He kept pace half a step behind like a hired hand. When the light slanted low, they turned off toward a creek. Alders leaned over the water. Stones showed through the clear run. Clara gathered small wood and tried to strike a spark, but her hands shook. Rafe crouched beside her, lifted one palm as if to ask for the flint. She placed it there. He worked the steel slowly, not to startle her. The tinder caught. He built the fire one-handed, the other hand bracing a bent knee. Then he took her right boot, gentle as if it were a bird, and stitched the split sole with wire pulled from his pocket. "Thank you," she said. He nodded once, then wrote in the soot on a flat stone, "Safe." Clara let herself breathe. Night listened. At first light they followed the creek north. Deer prints stitched the sand. Clara walked with her bag hugged close, counting steps like stitches. Rafe paced steadily, rope on his shoulder, eyes on the bank where water undercut the grass. By mid-morning the land opened into a meadow. A burned line shack sat near a split rail fence, roof half fallen, stones black from an old fire. Smoke smell still lived in the wood, though the ashes were gray. Clara stood at the threshold and set her jaw. "It will do," she said. Rafe stepped inside first. He tested the beam with the heel of his hand, then the sill with his boot. He pointed to the back wall where the stones had cracked and slumped. He looked at Clara and lifted his brows, asking without words. "We can fix it," she said. "We have to. Winter won't wait for polite." They unloaded what little they had. Rafe found a broken shovel and straightened it by wedging the iron against a boulder. He set stones one by one, tapping them true. Clara scrubbed the table with sand and creek water until the grain rose clean. She swept char from the corners and shook the dust from a quilt rolled tight at the bottom of her bag. At noon they ate hardtack and dried apples. Rafe chewed slowly, then stood and checked the fence. He pulled the wire tight with a stick lever. He patched the gap with a twist that held like a knot. Clara watched his hands, how sure they were. "Stone, iron, water," she said softly. "You know those three," he nodded once. Then he raised both hands and shaped the air like a roof, asking about the missing rafters. Clara thought of barter. "There's a mill in town," she said. "If I mend shirts and bake pies, maybe we can trade for planks." They worked until the sun slid behind the ridge and the meadow cooled. Rafe built a forge pit by the creek with a shallow trench to pull air. He saved bent nails in a tin and straightened them, glowing red. Clara stirred beans and salt pork and set 2 tin cups by the fire. They ate without hurry. After, Rafe carved a notch in the doorpost and set the bent key on a nail. Clara smiled. "Home," she said. He touched the word and nodded. Clara woke to frost lace on the window and a creek that spoke in small voices. She fed the fire and warmed water in the dented kettle. Rafe stepped outside and stood still, smelling the air like a tracker. When he came back, he set 2 fresh willow poles by the door and nodded toward the rafters. "Work first, always." They ate a heel of bread and the last of the apples. Then Clara tied her hair with a strip of cloth and said, "I'll go to town." Rafe lifted his eyebrows, asking if he should come. "Yes," she said. "Folks will look either way. Best they see us steady." The road was rutted and bright with frost. By mid-morning they reached the mill yard. Sawdust drifted like pale snow. Men stacked planks. A water wheel turned slowly in the cold. Clara asked for the foreman and offered what she had. Pies by the dozen, shirts mended, socks darned, and a strong back-to-haul stone. The foreman scratched his jaw. "You're the one married to the cage man." His tone held no warmth. "I married a worker," Clara said. "Fair trade for fair goods." Rafe set down his rope and lifted a bent wagon rim from a junk pile. He braced it and straightened a span with a wooden mallet, slow and sure. The ring turned under his hands. Men watching went quiet. Mrs. Harper came across the yard with a sack of flour at her hip. "Morning," she said. "If you bake in my stove, I'll take half-in loaves and speak for you on planks." The foreman shrugged. 2 lengths of good pine for 6 loaves, and he fixes the hinge on my saw gate." He pointed with his chin at a crooked iron clasp. Rafe kneeled and studied the hinge. He set a small fire in his travel pit, heated the clasp, and tapped it right. The gate swung smoothly. The foreman grunted, surprised. "All right," he said. "Take the pine." As they loaded the planks, Deputy Mott rode by, reins slack in one hand. He stared, slow and mean. "Paper won't wash a man clean," he said to Clara. "If there's trouble, it's on you." Clara met his eyes. "Then I'll keep trouble small." They walked home under a pale sun, boards on their shoulders, winter in their breath. At the creek, work waited, and they did it. By next week, the cabin would begin to look like a place someone could love. The new rafters held. Pine boards lay tight across them. Smoke went up the flue thin. Clara swept each morning and stacked kindling by size. Rafe checked the wall stones and tapped weak ones firm. Their rhythm grew simple. Work, water, bread, rest. Usefulness spreads faster than talk. A farmer came by with a wheel that wobbled. Rafe set his forge stones and heated the rim. He trued it with slow taps until it ran right. Payment came in potatoes and a sack of oats. Clara thanked the man and traded a warm loaf. The farmer left, looking back, thoughts turning. At the mill, a flume slat had split. Water leaked from a silver blade. Men argued and waved their hats. Rafe waded in up to his knees, closed the gap with a quick brace and wedged a fresh plank. The wheel groaned, then spun sure. Wet to the waist, he stepped out. The foreman nodded once. He can work, someone said. Still a risk, another muttered. Gossip gathered like crows on a fence. She married him to dodge the fee. He can't talk. He can't swear an oath. Look at his throat. Clara heard pieces of it in the store and on the road. She kept her chin level and counted the change exactly. 2 pounds of flour, 1 of beans. Thank you kindly. Her voice stayed soft, steady. Mrs. Harper stopped by the cabin with onions, salt, and a tin of pepper worth its weight. For stew, she said. Wind's turning. Keep your wood covered. She looked at Rafe's hands. You keep them clean. Smoke carries sickness if it gets in cuts. Rafe lifted his palms, scrubbed raw, and gave a half smile. That night, Clara cooked stew thick with potatoes and onion. She baked a pan of cornbread in the Dutch oven and poured 2 cups of coffee. Rafe planned the edge of the table smoothly and set the cups like a measured task. They ate with hunger, quietly at ease. Outside, coyotes sang far off. After the meal, Rafe took a bit of charcoal and wrote 1 word on the beam. Work. Clara touched the letters and nodded. Work is how we speak, she said. He looked at her, thoughtful, as if the meaning settled in his chest. The stove ticked. Night held. The day settled into a kind rhythm. Morning fire. Water from the creek. Hands were busy before the sun cleared the ridge. Clara mended shirts for the mill hands and cut a pattern for mitts. Rafe set nails straight and checked the roof after each wind. Small things started to feel like promises. Clara stitched a scarf from gray wool, the kind that warms the throat without weight. She worked by lamplight, counting each row. When she tied off the last thread, she folded the scarf into her apron. Rafe came in from the dark, hair damp with frost. He set a bundle of kindling by the door and stood unsure. Clara held out the scarf. For your throat, she said. Smoke scars do not like cold. He took it carefully as if it might break. He wrapped it once, then twice, and the rough skin at his neck hid behind soft wool. His eyes lifted. He pressed his hand to his chest, then toward her a quiet thank you. Later, he showed her a trick with water. He dropped a pine needle in a cup from the creek. The needle drifted fast toward the downstream side. He pointed to the ripples, then to the sky. Weather coming? She nodded. We will stack more wood. At noon, they shared bread and sage tea. Rafe carved a notch along the table edge so spoons would not roll. He smoothed the notch with a bit of glass. Clara laughed, a quick sound that surprised her. You notice everything, she said. He tapped 2 fingers to his temple and grinned, brief and shy. That evening, Clara hummed a hymn while she stirred beans. Rafe sat whittling at the threshold, shaving curls that fell like pale ribbons. He shaped a small wedge and set it under the door so it would not swing in the wind. The cabin held calm, even when coyotes called. After supper, he picked up a piece of charcoal and wrote slowly on the cleaned wallboard, Home. The letters were square and careful, like laid stones. He looked at Clara, asking if the word was true. She touched the H with 1 fingertip. Yes, she said. If we keep it warm and honest, he nodded. He reached into his pocket and set a small bent nail on the shelf, a tiny stash for future fixing. She placed a dried apple beside it. 2 small gifts side by side. The lamp burned low. Snow began to sift outside. Snow thinned by noon and the road to town showed in pale ruts. Clara packed 2 loaves, 3 mended shirts, and coins in a tin. Rafe slung the rope and the hammer he liked. They walked side by side, breath white in the cold. At the store, heads turned. Words hushed when Clara stepped in. She set the bread on the counter and laid the shirts in a neat stack. The shopkeeper counted slowly as if numbers might change shape. "You keep busy," he said. "Busy keeps a roof," Clara answered. The bell over the door rang. Deputy Mott came in with ice on his mustache and a look that cut. He leaned on the counter. "Judge is hearing a paper," he said. "Annulment. Says your union is a dodge." His smile did not reach his eyes. Clara kept her voice steady. "I filed ours honestly. The judge signed it. He can unsign," Mott said. He glanced at Rafe. "Man can't speak oath, man can't be husband. Law is words." Rafe stood still, scarf knit at his throat. He met the deputy's stare without heat. He took the receipt book, turned it toward Clara, and tapped the line for her name. She wrote it clean. He tapped the line for payment, counted exactly, and pushed the coins forward. His hand said, "We deal fair." Mrs. Harper stepped from the back with a sack of feed. "Deputy, you have chores or chatter?" she asked. "The judge keeps a calendar. He keeps a heart, too." Mott tipped his hat slowly. "Hearing at sundown," he said. "Bring your story. Leave the brute." He turned and went. Outside, the sun slid down a little. The town felt colder. Clara and Rafe ate a heel of bread by the livery, sitting on a hitch rail. A rider crossed the street, long coat, hat low. He looked at them once, then again, as if pain had taught him to memorize faces. "Garner," someone whispered from a doorway. "Luke," the rider's horse stamped. He reined in near the trough and drank from a tin cup. His mouth was a hard line. He kept watching the way a hawk watches the ground. Clara's hands went still. Rafe touched his scarf, then the hammer at his belt, then let his hand fall open. No weapon, only work. Sundown would bring a table, a judge, and choices. They stood to meet them. Sundown poured light through the courthouse windows. The room smelled of coal smoke. Judge Elam sat, glasses low. Deputy Mott stood with his thumbs in his belt like he owned the desk. A few townsfolk slipped in to watch. Mrs. Harper took a seat near the stove. The tall rider, Luke Garner, leaned in the doorway, shadow hiding his eyes. "The matter," Mott said, "is simple. The union was a trick. The man can't swear or speak. The paper is windy." Clara kept her hands folded. "Sir," she said to the judge, "I asked honestly for this. I gave up my ticket. I gave my name. I am asking the law to help me keep a man safe and useful, not loose and hunted." Rafe stood beside her, still as a tree in winter. He did not look at Mott, he looked at the judge. Then he reached into his coat and took out a small slate he had cut from the roof scrap. He wrote with a chalk stub, "Raphael Alder. Work for food. Obey peace." He set the slate on the desk, palms open. Mott snorted. "Scrawl is not oath." Judge Elam lifted the slate, eyes on the letters. "Words can stand without a mouth," he said. "I have seen dying men sign with a thumbprint and mean it." Luke Garner stepped one boot inside. "The dead also leave words," he said, voice flat. "My brother wrote that name." Silence pulled tight. Clara turned, careful. "I am sorry for your loss," she said. "But blame needs truth." Mrs. Harper rose. "Judge, I'll say one thing. They keep working. I see it, I see decency. The town needs both." She sat again, hands back in her lap. Judge Elam set the slate down. "Annulment denied today," he said. "The union stands while the circuit gathers its facts. Conditions. Miss Wynne keeps custody. Mr. Alder stays employed and inside county lines. If either breaks, this paper tears." Mott opened his mouth, then shut it. Luke's jaw moved once. "Then I'll find my facts," he said, and he left a cold draft in his wake. Outside, the sky bruised purple. Clara and Rafe stepped into it. She let out a breath she had held all afternoon. Rafe touched the scarf at his throat, then tapped the word on the slate. "Obey." "Together," Clara said. He nodded slowly. The first star showed there. Morning came clear and cold. A thin rim of ice glazed the water bucket. Clara cracked it with the back of a spoon and set the kettle on. Rafe stacked kindling in neat rows. They moved without hurry. Each knew the other's next reach. After breakfast, Clara spread shirts and thread on the table. Rafe brought in a sack of bent nails and a scrap of an iron bar. He warmed the bar in the coals and tapped a hook from it. Slow and neat. He set it high on the wall. "For your kettle," Clara said, and hung the handle there. It held. They walked the fence after sunup. The snow had settled into the grass and turned to slick mud where cattle had pressed along the boundary. Rafe cut willow wands and twisted them into a short brace. He showed Clara where to wedge it so the rail would not sag. She tried it, and the brace took weight. "Good," he signed with a thumbs up. By noon, they met a team stalled in the ruts. A family huddled on the wagon seat, a baby wrapped in quilts, a boy with a runny nose. The rear wheel had cracked. Rafe squatted, studied the grain, then looked at the father. He held up 2 fingers asking for time. The man nodded, hopeful. Rafe lit his forge pit at the ditch, fed it with dry sticks, and heated the iron tire. Clara kept the baby amused with her finger and a tin button, talking while the mother cried from cold and worry. When the iron was ready, Rafe and the father lifted the wheel, set the tire, and hammered the rim true. Steam burst white as breath. The wheel held. The mother pressed a jar of peaches into Clara's hands. "Please," she said. "For kindness." Clara wanted to refuse, but the woman shook her head. "Take it. I want to give." Back at the cabin, Clara opened the jar and spooned out 2 halves into tin bowls. They ate standing, juice sweet after months of salty food. Rafe closed his eyes once as if a bell rang far off. That night he planned a table edge clean and carved a star into the corner. He pushed it toward Clara, question in his eyes. "Leave it," she said. "Let folks know Hope sat here." Outside, the creek kept talking in the soft dark. Sunday came with blue air and church bells from town. Clara brushed ash from her dress and tied her hair. Rafe washed at the creek and wrapped the gray scarf carefully. They walked the road together. People would see them. That was the point. The church sat plain with whiteboards and a bell that rang small but clear. Folks gathered in coats and shawls. Some eyes slid away from Rafe. Some stayed curious. Mrs. Harper waved them to a bench near the back. The hymn rose slowly, old words everyone knew. Rafe did not sing, but he stood, hat in his hands, eyes on the window light. After the service, the yard filled with talk. Traders had set up 2 tables along the fence. Jars of pickles, a crate of eggs, rope, flour, and a tin of nails. Children ran in the dust. Clara laid her bread on the table, warm under a cloth, and made fair trade for beans and soap. Rafe watched the hinge on the church door sag. He fetched his small hammer and straightened the screw. The door shut smoothly. People noticed. Then the crowd pulled tight. Luke Garner had come. He tied his horse slowly and stepped through, hat low, jaw set. He stopped in front of Rafe. The yard held its breath. "You carry my brother's last day," Luke said. "I carry it too." Rafe stood steady. He touched his throat with 2 fingers, then opened his palm, empty. No gun. He reached inside his coat and brought out a small wrapped bundle. He unwrapped a whittled toy, a tiny horse with a broken ear smoothed by years of thumb. He set it on the table between them. He laid beside it a strip of ribbon burned on one edge. His eyes told the rest. Clara stepped up and spoke so all could hear. "The mine fire took his words," she said. "It took more. He kneels to work. He keeps the peace. If you want truth, ask for it plain and let it land." Rafe went to one knee in the dust. He bowed his head, hands open. No pride. Only grief and respect. Something in Luke's face loosened. He picked up the toy, weighed it, then set it back. "I'm not done," he said. "But I see you." The bell rang once in the cold air and talk began again. Different now, lower, kinder. They walked home. Morning broke sharp and bright. Frost bit the grass and made it sing underfoot. In town, a fresh notice hung on the courthouse door. Deputy Mott had nailed it high. Notice: circuit hearing in 7 days. Subject: Raphael Alder. Custody review. Any breach of peace or boundary. Jail and transport. Clara read it twice. Rafe stood beside her, shoulders square, eyes steady. Mott watched from the boardwalk, one boot on the rail. Report to me each noon, Mott said. You miss once, I pull the paper. We'll be here, Clara said. Her voice was even. He keeps peace. Luke Garner crossed the street slowly. He tapped the notice with one finger. 7 days, he said. I will bring what I can find. If truth clears him, I'll stand down. If not, we settle it like men. His gaze slid to Clara. I prefer truth. Mrs. Harper came up with a basket. Winter's dry, she said. Brush is tinder. Keep your barrels full. She squeezed Clara's hand. And keep your back straight before the law. They walked home with the clock in their ears. Rafe marked 7 cuts on the beam by the door. Each cut was as narrow as a pine needle. He wrote beside them days they worked harder. Clara baked early and stitched late. Rafe set a small sluice to the creek to feed a water barrel. He cleared dead grass from around the cabin, piling it far from the walls. He pointed to the slope above the meadow where the wind ran. His meaning was plain. Fire likes a ladder. At noon each day they walked to town. Rafe signed the slate in Mott's office. Raphael Alder, present, working. The deputy grunted and flipped the page. Folks saw the routine and let their voices drop. On the 3rd day, a gust carried a bitter smell. Rafe stopped, lifted his head, and looked west. No smoke showed. He stacked tools by the door and set a shovel in Clara's hand. She met his look and nodded. We will be ready, she said. On the 6th day, Luke returned, dust on his coat. One more day, he told Clara. I am close to something that matters. The 7th sunrise came like a blade. The creek ran quickly. The air tasted of iron and smoke. They dressed for town and for whatever would follow. Clocks ticked inside them. If you're with us so far, tap like so more folks find clean stories like this. Wind came hard from the west, hot and strange. The courthouse windows clicked in their frames. People packed into the room until the stove went cold. Judge Elam set his palm on the desk and looked at the clock. Noon. Luke Garner stood near the back with dust on his sleeves. He held a folded paper but did not lift it yet. Mrs. Harper sat straight, hands near her shawl. Deputy Mott leaned in the doorway like a brace. Clara and Rafe stood side by side. Rafe's scarf hid the old burns. His eyes were clear. He set his chalk and slate on the edge of the desk, ready to sign. A smell threaded the room. Not coal, not kitchen. Ash and pitch. Heads turned toward the open window. Far off, a single bell clanged, thin and wrong. A boy burst in. Fire on Long Ridge, he yelled. Wind's kicking it toward the draw. The room broke into noise. Hats grabbed. Boots thumped. Mott's voice rode over the rest. Jail first, he said, pointing at Rafe. If folks run, I won't have him slip the line. Clara stepped in front of Rafe like a fence post set deep. He's stronger free than locked when fire comes, she said. You know that. Judge Elam's jaw worked. He weighed paper against smoke. He slapped the desk once. Hearing is held, he said. All hands to the creek and the schoolyard. Bucket lines. Wet roofs. Clear the brush from the walls. Deputy, you ride and warn the far lots. Mott hesitated, then spat. Fine, but if he runs, he won't, Clara said. He works. Rafe lifted his slate and wrote fast, water line, brake fuel. He held it high so men could see. Then he moved, steady, through the door and into the blowing light. Outside, the sky had a brown edge. Needles fell like dry rain. The church bell rang wild and small. Children cried. Horses danced in the traces. Rafe scanned the street. Barrel, rope, scrap iron in a blacksmith's pile, the slow churn of the mill creek. His hands opened and closed as if measuring weight and swing. He touched the iron, then the rope, then pointed to the water like a man naming tools. Clara met his eyes. Tell me where, she said. He pointed uphill, then drew a line with his boot. Here we cut, here we hold. They ran. Rafe reached the mill creek first. He dropped to one knee and put his hand in the water, feeling the push. Then he looked at the pile of scrap beside the blacksmith's shed. A cracked wheel rim, a length of chain. 2 dented pans and a bar of iron that had lost its end. He pointed, short and sure. Clara fetched what he named. Bucket line from the school to the creek, Clara called. Children to the church with wet cloths. Keep doors shut. People moved. Mrs. Harper clapped to set the rhythm. The bell at the church rang again, too small for the valley. Rafe built a shallow pit on the creek bank and fed it with split cedar. He worked the bellows with one hand and shaped the iron bar with the other, setting the end to flatten. He held it with tongs, eyes narrow against sparks. Tap, turn, tap. A clapper grew at the end of the bar, plain and heavy. He rigged a frame from the wagon rim and 2 poles, lashing them with rope, and hung the clapper in the circle. Then he ran a chain back to the water wheel and looped it around a spoke. When the wheel turned, the chain would lift and drop the clapper. Test. The clapper fell and struck the rim with a hard, ringing note that cut through shouting. Heads turned. Hope turned with them. Clara shoved buckets down the line. Wet the roofs, wet the brush, keep the yards clean, she said. Smoke rolled over the ridge like a dirty tide. Embers leaped ahead and died on wet shingles. Luke Garner hauled water like a hired hand, jaw set, eyes on the line. When a child coughed, he handed over his neckerchief and went back for more. Rafe took a shovel and marked a fire break above the school, scraping down to mineral dirt. He set adults in pairs, one to dig, one to pull brush. He showed them how to lay green limbs along the edge to slow sparks. He said nothing with his mouth, and yet orders ran clear. The wind roared. The creek bell hammered steady as a heart. Houses steamed. The first tongue of flame showed at the far fence and licked at dry weeds. Clara ran to stamp it, fell, rose again, and stamped until it died. Hold, she said. Hold the line. All together. The wind changed like a door slamming. Smoke pushed low and fast, and sparks jumped the road. The creek bell struck again and again until the note lived in everyone's bones. People moved to its beat without thinking. Rafe pointed to the schoolyard fence. Dry rails would carry flame like a fuse. He pried the pins and knocked 2 sections flat so fire could not climb. He waved to Luke and the 2 boys. Together they dragged the rails into a wet patch by the trough. Luke's coat smoked. He slapped at it, kept working, and did not curse. Deputy Mott rode up red-faced. Get that man out, he yelled, pointing at Rafe. If anything goes wrong, I'll not have him in the middle. He jumped down with irons in his hand. Clara stepped between them. You put those away, she said, voice like a stake driven to rock. He built the bell. He marked the break. Look around you. A gust hurled a sheet of embers over their heads and into the churchyard. Grass flashed into lines of fire. Rafe ran, pulled the chain from the bell and swung the clapper by hand so the note grew fierce and close. He threw his arm toward the flames and then to the bucket line. People shifted. The fire hissed out under a dozen pails. Mott grabbed Rafe's sleeve. Rafe did not pull free, only looked at him, steady and tired. Luke caught Mott's wrist. Leave him, Luke said. If you need to chain someone, chain me to a shovel. He pushed a tool into Mott's hands. Pride met purpose. Purpose won. Rafe sprinted toward the ridge above town. He scratched a second line with his shovel and set men to widening it. 4 feet, 6, then 10. He showed them how to cut a notch so the wind would lift over the town and skip. He spread a tarp and poured water on it, lay flat and dragged burning brush off the line with a hooked branch. Sparks kissed his scarf and died. Clara led a ring of women around the schoolhouse, wet skirts smoking. She sang a hymn to keep the beat. Little words, strong rhythm. Children inside echoed the last line like a prayer. For a long half-hour the fire pressed. Then the wind eased. Flames thinned to orange threads that cooled to black. They were still standing at last. Smoke dragged low over town until evening, then lifted like a curtain. Ash lay on roofs and hats. People stood in small groups, quiet, holding cups of water as if they were lamps. The creek bell still tapped from the wheel, slow now like a heartbeat after a hard run. Rafe leaned on his shovel. Soot masked his face. The gray scarf was singed in 2 spots. Clara touched the burnt threads with her thumb and then smoothed his sleeve. You did good, she said. He shook his head once as if to say, "We did." Deputy Mott wiped his mouth and looked anywhere but at Rafe. He held the shovel Luke had pushed on him. He set it down and cleared his throat. "Town stands," he said. "That's the count." It was not praise, but it was not blame either. Luke filled another bucket and poured it along the church fence. He moved stiffly from the heat and work. When he came near Rafe, he stopped. "You fought for them," he said. "Not just yourself." He opened his hand. In it lay the tiny whittled horse. "I carried this all day. It stayed cool." Rafe cupped the toy for a moment, then set it on the church step where children could see it and not break it. He touched the rim with one finger like a promise set in wood. Mrs. Harper went from house to house with a brazier and a spoon of camphor. "Breathe here slowly," she told the old and the little ones. She paused by Rafe and dabbed salve along his jaw. "No talking suits you," she said kindly. "But if you must, warm tea first." He smiled with his eyes. Clara counted heads and sent boys to stamp any smoking patch along the road. She kept the bucket line going until the roofs dripped. Then she poured coffee into tin cups and pressed one into Mott's hand, one into Luke's and one into Rafe's. "Drink," she said. "Then we sweep." By lamplight, townsfolk cleared ash from the schoolhouse floor. Rafe straightened a bent desk leg. Clara washed sooty faces with a rag dipped in warm water and herbs. Laughter returned in small pieces like coins found after loss. Near midnight, the wind died. Stars came out clean. The bell fell silent. The town breathed all at once. They walked home slowly, tired and unafraid. Together. Morning came soft and gray after the fire. Ash lay in the grass like cold snow. The cabin smelled of wet smoke and coffee. Clara rose slowly, every muscle sore. Rafe was already outside, stacking tools in order, and checking the roof for stray embers. He looked tired and steady. They ate bread and beans at the table edge Rafe had smoothed. After, Clara set her palm on the wood. "We did not run," she said. "Remember that." He tapped his chest, then hers, crossed his fingers together. Together. In town, folks moved like people who had slept little and kept their thanks quiet. The school roof was damp and safe. Children made lines with sticks in the mud and called the lines fire breaks. The little bell rope hung by the door. It seemed too small now. Judge Elam walked the street with a soot mark still on his cheek. He stopped at the creek, looked at the wheel, the rim, the chain. He swung the clapper once. The note rolled out clean. "That sound saved houses," he said. Deputy Mott stood near, hat in his hands for once. He cleared his throat. "The hearing stands," he said, more habit than heat. "But I won't chain a man who holds a line." He met Rafe's eyes and did not look away. It was not an apology. It was a start. Luke Garner leaned on the school fence. He turned the tiny carved horse in his hand, then tucked it into his pocket. "I went back to Silverton last week," he told Judge Elam. "Found tracks, found talk. I'll speak when the room is right." He looked at Clara. "Until then, I'll help hang that bell where all can hear it." They carried the rim and clapper to the schoolyard. Rafe measured by eye, marked the beam, and bored holes with a hand auger. Luke lifted, Rafe set, Judge Elam held the ladder, and Mott tied the knot. When it hung true, Rafe pulled the chain once. The sound moved across the valley like clear water. People gathered without being called. Mrs. Harper said, "Let this bell mean work before fear." Heads nodded. Faces softened. Clara slipped her hand around Rafe's wrist. She did it in daylight, not hiding. "We stand as one," she said, simple and plain. Rafe turned his hand and held hers back, fingers firm, no shaking. He took a scrap of charcoal and wrote on the school step, small and square, U.S. The word looked right. The hearing met again 2 days after the fire. The sky was clean, the air cool, and folks came early. The school bell had a new tone in their minds. Clara and Rafe stood side by side before Judge Elam. Deputy Mott held his ledger and kept his mouth tight. Luke Garner stood near the door, hat in his hands. Judge Elam rapped the desk once. "We return to the matter of Raphael Alder," he said. Work and conduct since the last sitting are noted. Today we hear facts from before. Luke lifted his head. I went to Silverton, he said. I asked questions of men who don't like daylight. I found little clean, but I found a woman who saw enough. He turned. Mrs. Harper. The room stirred. Mrs. Harper stepped forward, shawl neat, chin up. I was in Silverton in spring, she said. I had a midwife call at Mrs. Doerr's boarding house. My path took me past the miners' alley. I saw Luke's brother, Tom Garner, drunk and hot. He shouted at a foreman about pay and pride. Mr. Alder stepped between open hands. Tom drew first, fast and wild. A wall took the bullet. Mr. Alder moved him down, held him, and made him breathe. No gun was fired by Mr. Alder. None. Luke's knuckles went white on his hat. You swear that? I do, she said. I would have spoken sooner, but I didn't know whose name the cage held. I know now. She looked at Rafe. I remember, too, the mine fire days later. Smoke took voices and senses. Folks ran wrong. I saw Mr. Alder carry a man out coughing blood. That man lived. He owes daylight to these hands. Mott cleared his throat. Words are wind, he said weakly. Do you bring proof? Mrs. Harper reached into her basket and set down a ribbon burned on one edge, and a wooden token stamped with the mill's paymark. Tom Garner dropped these when he fell, she said. I kept them for his kin. I give them now. Luke stepped forward and touched the ribbon like it might vanish. His face changed, grief moving into place with understanding. He nodded once, hard. Tom drew first, he said, voice rough. And this man did not kill him. The mountain took the rest. Judge Elam leaned back. He looked at Rafe, he looked at Clara, he looked at the town. Then he spoke, dry and steady. Charges dismissed, he said. The civil union stands. Let the record show usefulness, peace, and courage. Silence held for one slow breath. Then the room let go of its air. Rafe closed his eyes. Clara caught his hand. The courthouse emptied into bright noon. People spoke low at first, as if a loud word might break the peace they had won. Then voices warmed. Hands reached. Mrs. Harper hugged Clara quickly and firmly. Go home, she said. Eat something sweet. Judge Elam shook Rafe's hand. Town keeps the sound of that bell, he said. Keep your hands to work and your feet in this valley. Deputy Mott stood with his hat crushed a little. He looked at Rafe as if learning new letters. You keep reporting at noon this week, he said out of habit, then caught himself. No, that won't be needed. He cleared his throat. If the mill wants a gate latch, I'll send for you at a fair rate. It was the closest thing to an apology he knew. Luke Garner stepped close, eyes level. He held out the burned ribbon and the wooden pay token. I carried anger too long, he said. Do right by her. He tipped his head toward Clara. And by yourself. Rafe touched the ribbon, then Luke's forearm once. A man's thank you without words. Luke nodded and stepped back into the crowd. Children ran to the schoolyard and pulled the new bell's chain. The note rang clean across the roofs. Someone started a pot of coffee outside the church. Plates appeared, biscuits, jam, a pan of cinnamon bread from Mrs. Harper that made the street smell like morning. Clara laughed when a boy pressed a jar of pennies into her hands. For nails, he said. My pa says you make things hold. Rafe fixed the church's loose pew slat with 2 straight nails and a small wedge. He made a hinge pin for the store's back door from an old nail and a file. Folks watched without staring. They spoke to him like a man. Thank you. Can you look at my plow? Good work yesterday. Each word landed like a post set true. Clara traded bread for 2 window panes and a bag of seed. She bought a spool of blue thread only because it was pretty. When she tucked it into her pocket, she felt light. We belong, she thought. The word surprised her and fit. They walked the road home with gifts in their arms. Glass wrapped in newspaper, a tin of lard, a hen in a basket that clucked like it approved. The creek talked beside them. The mountains looked close. At the cabin, Rafe set the panes on the table and touched the beam where he had cut the 7 marks. He drew a line beneath them and wrote clear, Clara smiled. Yes, she said. Clear. Snow melted from the meadow's edge and the ground showed brown and reddy. The bell at the school hung quietly, a proud circle against blue sky. The town moved like a place that had passed a hard test and kept its manners. People waved when Clara and Rafe walked in and asked, "How goes the roof?" And meant it. Clara traded a loaf for carrot seed and a tin of baking powder. She bought calico for 2 curtains. Blue, she told the shopkeeper. For the east window. He wrapped the cloth without comment, only a small nod. Rafe checked the mill flume and set a new brace where the water pushed. He hammered light, listening to wood speak. At the churchyard, he fixed a loose hinge with a nail he had filed thin. Deputy Mott passed by, paused, and tipped his hat. "Good day," he said, plain. Rafe returned the nod. Luke Garner saddled his horse near the livery. He tied a bag to the saddle horn, mounted, and looked once toward the ridge. Then he turned to Clara and Rafe and lifted 2 fingers in a salute. No words, the message was clear as a road. "I am done hunting. Live back at the cabin." Clara washed the new panes and set them in soft putty. Light poured across the table. She stitched the calico into curtains and hung them on willow rods. The room changed. The hen in the basket gave a loud opinion and laid an egg. Clara laughed, quick and bright. Rafe tilled a small bed by the door with a fork he had mended. Clara pressed carrot seed into soft earth with 1 finger, line by line. She planted hope in rows. Rafe watered with a dipper. They sat on the step as the afternoon thinned. The mountains were gray and the creek hummed. A wagon passed the distant road unhurried. No one watched the cabin now. They simply knew who lived there. Clara looked at Rafe's profile and felt a question rise. Now that the paper is clear, will he stay from duty or choose to stay for them? She let the question rest. Rafe stood and reached into the toolbox. He lifted a piece of wagon spring, scarred. He weighed it, then slipped it into his pocket. His eyes were very steady, warm at the edges. Evening came softly. Home felt like a promise kept true. Evening settled softly over the cabin. The new windows held light like small lakes. Clara set 2 tin mugs on the step and waited. Rafe came from the shed with the wagon spring in his hand. He looked at her, then at the file and hammer laid ready on a cloth. She had guessed his mind and set the tools out. He heated the spring end in a shallow coal bed until it glowed a dull cherry. Sparks drifted up, tiny and sure. He shaped the metal slowly, turning and tapping, patient as prayer. The ring found its circle under his hands. When the glow died, he cooled it in water, then polished it with ash and oil until it shone like a quiet star. Clara watched in silence. Her breath showed once in the cooling air. When he held the ring up, she held out her palm without drama. He set the ring there. She turned it in her fingers, smiling small. "It is enough," she said. He nodded. They walked to the porch. The school bell in town stood quiet against the sky. The creek ran low and sweet. Rafe lifted the bent key from its nail and weighed it, then hung it back. "This house keeps us," Clara said. "We will keep it." Rafe took her hand, warm and work-strong. He slid the ring onto her finger. The size was right, as if he had measured by memory. He looked at her for a long time. Something eased in his face like a door unbarred. "Stay," he said. The single word was rough at the edges, but whole. It moved through the little room and out the open window. Clara did not cry. She set her forehead to his and let out a laugh that trembled like light on water. They made a small supper. They sat on the step with their shoulders touching. After, Clara carried the key inside and set it on the nail again, solid and simple. Rafe wrote one more word on the clean beam above the table. Home, he had written before. Now he added, U.S. dawn touched the peaks in pink. The bell metal in town glinted. The breeze came down the draw and crossed the porch like a blessing. Clara whispered, "Stay once more," soft and glad. From the mountains the stillness answered, the old word that needs no mouth, amen. If this story felt like home, tap subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss the next frontier romance. Hit like and comment stay so I know you made it to the porch. Share this with a friend who loves clean Western love stories.